It's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure to be able to be part of this lecture series. And let me just say a few words about my background. I am an assistant professor at the Graduate School of Education. I teach courses in inclusive education, in higher education, um, focusing on educational policy research, but I also teach research methods. And lately, more than anything, I teach quantitative research methods, which also include focus on statistical data analysis. And our students come from very diverse backgrounds at GSE, but when it comes to quantitative research, then sometimes we notice that people have some anxiety. So this is why the topic of today is to talk about the possibilities to learn statistics in ways that minimize the anxiety. The plan for today is as follows. Since I am expecting that the audience might be quite broad, I would like to start with the basics, ABC of what is quantitative research. Then I would like to tell you a little more about what kinds of questions in education do students tackle applying quantitative research in education, and provide some examples from the work of Graduate School of Education students' thesis. Then I would like to turn to the actual or main topic of today is what about statistics anxiety, and highlight some insights from research. And then I also say some words about approaches that GSE faculty apply to help students become confident quantitative researchers, that is, learn statistics, and also outline approaches that students have shared with me that they use to gain confidence in conducting quantitative research. And I would like to conclude with kind of a rhetorical question. Am I able to become a quantitative researcher, that maybe some of you in the audience may ask? So let me then start with this basic question, ABC. What is quantitative research? One of the definitions given for this question or the term is that quantitative research is explaining phenomena by collecting numerical data that are analyzed using mathematically based methods, in particular statistics. So as this statement already includes, it emphasizes that research seeks to explain something about social phenomena. And in quantitative research, we do it through numerical data that we analyze using statistical data analysis methods. They are mathematically based, but I would like to say that it's not the same. That what is doing statistical data analysis is not the same what is doing mathematics problems in as you remember you were doing back at school. So I would like to highlight this distinction. And this is the focus of quantitative research, to explain and describe social world using numbers, and analyze these numbers using statistical methods. So if we talk about quantitative research design, since there are different ways how we can formulate a research problem and seek to establish what the social reality is, then we can distinguish between two major types of quantitative research designs. One is non-experimental research design, and another is experimental research design. So research design includes specific procedures that are involved in the research process. So the way data is collected, the way data is analyzed, and of course, the way data or findings are presented. So in non-experimental research, we focus on naturally occurring phenomena, behaviors or phenomena, meaning researchers typically would do surveys in order to observe a social world without trying to apply some kind of intervention that would change the behavior of people. And survey research is one of very well-known approaches and types of non-experimental research designs. Then we also have experimental research design, where the word experiment already communicates that researchers do something to change the behavior of people, or try to get people to react in certain ways to certain interaction. So in short, experimental studies will always include and focus on the effect of a treatment or intervention on some attribute or phenomena. So these are two major research designs that we can talk about in quantitative studies. Now, let me just illustrate these two with some research questions. For example, non-experimental research questions would ask, and these are examples from a study in the UK, what are the educational aspirations of a sample of pupils from inner city schools at age 11 and at age 14? So this research question implies that there will be an observation or data collected on educational aspirations among pupils who are 11 years old and 14 years old and who study in inner city schools in Great Britain. So educational aspirations we cannot observe with the naked eye, right? So we may want to ask questions through the form of survey that then the students would fill out and answer by stating what their educational aspirations are. Also, we can ask in non-experimental research, are there significant differences in the levels of educational aspirations by gender, age, or ethnic group? We can also ask, to what extent are educational aspirations correlated with factors in the home, school, or peer group? So we want to not just describe these educational aspirations, but also see how some factors that are a situation at home, school environment, for example, relationships with friends, how these factors influence educational aspirations. Also, we can ask, can ethnic group differences in factors scores from the questionnaire account for ethnic group differences in educational aspirations? Meaning, can we detect that there is some difference in educational aspirations based on the ethnicity of students? So, and of course, again, ethnicity of students and their educational aspirations, this data would be collected through surveys conducted engaging a sample of students. These are the types of questions that we can examine in a non-experimental way. Now, what kinds of questions can we examine in experimental way? I would like to start here and talk about two studies, but start with what sometimes, especially in policy research and education, researchers call a natural experiment, meaning that there has been some major policy intervention, say the government started some new policy, and researchers try to see how was the situation before the policy was introduced and how did it change after it was introduced. So on this slide, you can see illustration or a summary for a study that was conducted in the United States and focused on how students from minority groups, ethnic minority groups, are assigned to gifted education programs. And as you see, researchers focused on two types of schools, and they had data about the number of students by different demographic characteristics, which also include ethnicity and socioeconomic status, how often these students were assigned to gifted education programs before universal screening for gifted education program assignment was launched in the school district. Then what happened when universal screening was implemented, and you can see that on the slide there is a line marked with red dots, that the number of students assigned to gifted education programs increased very rapidly. But then, unfortunately, universal screening doesn't happen for free. There needs to be money to support these kinds of programs. So due to budget cuts, this program was suspended in the school district. And as you can see, again, assigning students from minority and low-income backgrounds to gifted education program sharply declined after universal screening was abolished, because teachers and parents who normally would refer students to gifted education programs in low-income families and for minority students, parents probably don't have time or awareness to assign their students to gifted education, and teachers tend not to do it. Teachers tend not to assign low-income and minority students oftentimes to gifted education programs. So what this study demonstrated by capturing this natural experiment of a program implementing universal screening for gifted education among all students, which also included low-income and minority students, they indicated that indeed parents and teachers, if they need to decide who is gifted or which student qualifies to be assigned to gifted education program, then parents and teachers tend to underreport students with potential who come from low-income and minority backgrounds. So experimental research design, as you see, sometimes can be implemented not by researchers directly. It's not the researchers in this case who made the intervention and created the policy intervention for the school district. It was the school district who did it. But researchers were able to capture the effect of this policy on students having access to gifted education program. And so this is how it's called, a natural experiment, when some intervention happened, and we can very clearly observe its results because we can see how the situation changes due to this intervention. And this is one example. Another example is where researchers play a role. And here I would like to present another type of experimental research design study, and that is a study with random assignment to groups. So one of the characteristics of experimental design in social sciences, since we cannot control in social sciences for everything, we can control for randomly assigning participants to the experimental group or to the treatment group, right? And so this is an example of a study where this has happened. And here, my colleagues at the Graduate School of Education exactly examined the question on student giftedness and whether teachers in Kazakhstan are somehow biased in terms of assigning students to gifted education programs. And so researchers asked a question: what is the role of the students' gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status in teachers' referrals for gifted programs and schools in Kazakhstan? So here, the way researchers were able to study this question was that they created 8 types of profiles of students, where academic achievement description and IQ description was exactly the same, but what differed, it was the part where researchers presented gender, income, ethnicity of students. And then these different profiles were distributed among teachers, randomly assigned to different profiles of students, and teachers then would provide their information as part of demographic characteristics and of the teachers, but also then make a statement or conclusion: yes, after reading the profile, I would refer the student to a gifted education program, or no, I would not refer the student to gifted education program. Well, in the result of this research, actually, we have news that is good for Kazakhstan. Results in this study showed that student gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status did not influence the Kazakhstani teachers' referrals for gifted education among students. So it doesn't mean that this question is answered for good for Kazakhstan. This is just one study. For us to be able to draw definite conclusions, we need to build on substantial amount of evidence. So if you are interested in continuing exploring this topic about how equity is observed and complied with when assigning students to gifted education programs in Kazakhstan, then absolutely this is a topic you can tackle. But these are two possible approaches: studying a natural experiment and then doing experiment with random assignment to groups. These are two approaches how experimental research design can be implemented in or carried through educational research. Now, let me now move to types of questions that students in education at GSE address applying quantitative research. And these are just some examples. Mostly our students use survey research. And here is one example of a mixed method study, mixed methods research designs where students would do, which include partly quantitative elements and qualitative elements. So these are quite commonly practiced among our students at GSE, but quantitative element typically is based on survey research. And here is one example. A student examined a question: why do international students choose Kazakhstan? So the focus was set on the push and pull factors that influence full-time international students' choice to study at universities in Kazakhstan. And some of the findings in this thesis was that there is a general perception of Kazakhstan as a safe country that attracts international students. Also, the availability of seats at Kazakhstani universities is a factor because countries like India have more competition for the seats available. And also the cost of higher education in Kazakhstan in the point of view of international students was affordable as compared to some other places. So this student, she conducted a survey, and then based on the survey results, she selected participants to further explore and deeper explore the question, conducting qualitative interviews. So this is one very popular way how students study different questions in education at GSE as part of their thesis research. So a typical survey study that applied classical survey research design, if I may say so, was the study that focused on teachers' knowledge of dyslexia in Kazakhstan. So this study involved a sample of over 1,000 teachers from Akmola region, and the research questions asked what is the level of teachers' knowledge of dyslexia in public schools in Akmola region of Kazakhstan, as well as what is the relationship between teachers' understanding of dyslexia and their pre-service and in-service teacher training experiences. So findings indicated that teachers have limited awareness about dyslexia, and it was especially pronounced for the neurological and cognitive characteristics of this learning disorder. There was also low awareness about effective strategies to teach learners with dyslexia, and many teachers reported that their pre-service teacher training programs did not prepare them to teach students with learning disabilities such as dyslexia. So this study actually has very good applied value in terms of indicating that pre-service teacher programs should certainly include training for teachers how to work with students who have learning disabilities such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, and some others. And also in-service teacher training would need to focus on these aspects. The third type of studies that our students do, which do not include experimental research design, but draw on large data sets that are obtained through survey research, are theses where students use so-called big data when they examine different questions. And until now, our students quite have quite frequently used the data from Program for International Student Assessment, known as abbreviation PISA. So what is PISA? It's a large international study where many countries in the world participate, and this study measures 15-year-olds' ability to use their reading, mathematics, and science knowledge and skills to meet real-life challenges. So Kazakhstan participates in this international study, and it's a very rich data for analysis. Our students, two examples here, have examined questions on for example, how gender, socioeconomic status of students, school's environment, language composition, school type ownership and resources affect students' reading literacy. And another question that has been zoomed in is what personal and socio-contextual factors explain the likelihood of Kazakhstani 15-year-olds to be either high or low achievers in reading. So again, this is just one big data set that tackles questions that are very important for education. We also have the survey of teachers, known by abbreviation TALIS. We have a study of adult literacy called PIAC, where Kazakhstan participated for the first time, and it is extremely rich data set. So these are certainly, data hubs that are freely available for researchers who are interested in examining various questions to use, and they can do it by using, again, quantitative research methods. Now, let me get to the, I guess, main topic of interest of today. What about statistics anxiety? So I was talking about research that our students have done to illustrate that students engaged with various topics that include quantitative data analysis. And some of them apply more complex statistical analysis techniques, such as multi-level modeling. And some of them focus on more basic statistical analysis techniques, such as trying to observe trends in data. For example, if one wants to take a look at what happens over the years with student achievement, then TALIS TIMS, the study of mathematics achievement, which is also an international study, presents us with data for several years for Kazakhstan, so we can see the dynamic. So there are all these approaches that students implement. So how do they manage to do that in their master's thesis? So the question would be, is everybody who comes to this program and who decides to engage in quantitative research has already done some quantitative research in the past? Well, the answer is no. Many students actually have not done any research before they come to the program at NU GSE. And before I talk about specific steps that faculty at GSE uses to try to minimize anxiety that students may have learning statistics, I would like to cite some research findings here. A review of research on focusing specifically on anxiety among students who study statistics indicates that there are kind of two sets of factors that influence how students perceive statistics, what's their level of anxiety. So one seems to do with the aspects of the statistics course itself, and another one has to do with personality of student. So when we talk about the aspects of the statistics course itself, then what research shows is that students taking accelerated and online courses experience more anxiety than those in normally paced in-person classes. So let me unpack this a little bit. Accelerated courses here mean a lot of information in a very short time, and the normally paced course would be a long semester course where students meet for a class statistics course once or maybe twice a week for the duration of several months. And research shows that these short, very intense courses seem to be associated with higher level of anxiety among students than these longer courses. The online aspect is also something that needs to be considered, and I think many of us have now experience of teaching all sorts of courses online, including statistics. And here, I would need to say that actually at Graduate School of Education, teaching statistics online, especially in these courses that have longer time allocated for the course, the experience was overall positive. And it was positive because online instruction mode gave possibility to keep very good record of the class and the class discussion, explanations, and demonstrations. So we would normally record our class sessions, and then recordings of these class sessions would be shared with students, and then students, as they revise after the class, they are able to see the video and listen as many times as they need. And of course, see also the slides on the video and the comments that go with that, since we would record the picture and the sound at the same time. Also, with some colleagues, we would pre-record our lectures, meaning if we are today to cover a topic of descriptive statistics, we record our lecture in advance. We run the slides and we talk as we would do it in class, but we just do it in recording, and then this recording is saved to the YouTube link, and then students again can view this link before they come to class, and they are actually encouraged to do this. So we practiced the flipped classroom approach in every single class of statistics that I was teaching with the colleagues that I was teaching together. So, and it seems that the anxiety level for the longer courses, even if they were online, did not stay very high. Over the time, it declined when students realized that they are actually succeeding with acquiring the content of the class. So with very short classes, it is more challenging, of course, because there is less time to focus on material. So, but I already kind of jumped into what we at GSC do when teaching statistics, but nevertheless, it's relevant here. So this was kind of my experience comment to the findings in research that online courses tend to be associated with higher anxiety level in teaching statistics. Based on my personal experience, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It depends a lot on the time, how much time there is for the course. Now, let me talk a little about the personality of the student that also has something to do with the anxiety levels that students feel. So research indicates that students who have difficulty dealing with uncertainty or ambiguity tend to be more anxious. And in statistics, sometimes the solution doesn't seem very clear and obvious and upfront. You need to kind of struggle a little. So if people are uncomfortable with struggling a little until they figure out the problem, they might feel a little more anxious until they figure out the solution. Then also, what is an important finding is that students who procrastinate tend to have higher anxiety levels. So dear students, don't procrastinate. It will help you to feel better about learning statistics, because postponing something doesn't mean that you are addressing the issue. It's just that you are pushing it away. So procrastination doesn't help in any way, including in statistics, learning statistics. Also research, and this research comes from US-based evidence, indicates that lower reading ability or poorer learning strategies also are associated with higher levels of anxiety among students when they learn statistics. So certainly these are factors to consider for us as instructors when we design the courses, but also for students, it's very important to be reflective learners. What I mean when I say reflective learner, it means that you need to be aware, or students need to be aware what works for them as they learn and what factors in their behavior or maybe what skill sets hinder the learning, and then work towards addressing those problem areas in order to move on with the learning overall. So these are some findings from research I wanted to share. And now let me then move on and continue what I already started and talk about approaches that GSE faculty apply to teach quantitative research and statistics. So I can't even recall how many times the first sentence in the class that I would hear from students in quantitative research methods is that I'm really bad at math. So a student comes to me and starts with the sentence to kind of already apologize in advance if they will not be doing very well in class. So what I would like to say, and I mentioned it already, statistics is not exactly mathematics as you remember it from school. Of course, these are mathematically based analytic techniques. However, you don't have to do math to do statistics. For us as instructors, we can minimize this anxiety in students that I'm really bad at math by reducing focus on mathematics in courses that teach quantitative research methods, including statistical data analysis. So instead of, getting students to calculate everything by hand, maybe we can really focus more on helpful software tools in addressing different problems than putting emphasis on that students know specific formulas. Of course, many statistical concepts are better understood if math is understood behind it. So, of course, to teach about the average that is called mean and to explain the meaning of outliers, calculations are very helpful, but really there needs to be, some reasonable balance in terms of how much we focus on formulas and how we integrate these formulas in teaching concepts and the ways how this knowledge of concepts can be applied in statistical research. So first is reduced focus on mathematics is one step to reduce student anxiety when teaching statistics. Then another approach that we do is we apply, at least in the courses where I have taught, low stakes assessment approach, which recognizes the value of trial and error. So students are assessed, but they do multiple frequent assignments which don't carry very heavy load or impact on the final grade if they get one of them wrong. And then also when for example, when I see that students struggle with some question in the first assignment, I give opportunity for them to kind of to gain again advantage for the next assignment during the next assignment for the previous one by including a review question. So it doesn't guarantee them any additional points necessarily for that additional review question, but it gives them opportunity again to do the question, to receive feedback and to check their knowledge. So this low stakes assessment approach with frequent assessment tasks is also a way how students can practice through this trial and error in a sense. Then I mentioned already when I talked flipped classroom approach. So the flipped classroom approach is kind of one of the standard ways that has now become part of teaching quantitative research at GSE. So we expect students to engage with class content and assignments before coming to class. So if today we are covering ANOVA, multivariate analysis, so students are expected to have read the content and also to have viewed these pre-recorded lectures before coming to class. So we can use the class time then to focus, zoom in on specific questions and clarify concepts that are more difficult. then, as also I mentioned, we use recorded Zoom class sessions for repeated viewing for students. They are all made available. And another thing that's important are anonymous communication channels with students, because people might feel embarrassed asking questions that they feel, no, they are very basic and I don't want to sound dumb, right? So the concern is I don't want to sound like I don't know anything. So, and this is why some students may be shy to ask questions in class, or even if they ask questions in class, they would prefer not to hear that they were mistaken. So in order to alleviate the anxiety of asking questions in front of public, it's very important to have anonymous communication channels with students, where students can address faculty one-on-one. I mean, for the faculty, it's not necessarily anonymous, but if it's kind of a discussion forum, then it's nice if the discussion forum can be anonymous, that students don't have to ask questions giving their name. And that also encourages communication and helps to decrease some of the anxiety that goes along with studying statistics. Well, and finally, what we kind of try to do in class and to encourage students to think about statistics as something that they cannot really break, right? When you do data analysis on a software, be it SPSS or Stata or R, you know, you can press buttons and nothing will explode. Really, you can't break anything. All you can get is wrong statistical analysis result. I mean, you need to understand why it's wrong and so on, of course. But nothing major will happen just because you tried and it didn't work with the first try. So trying is really key, and you won't mess up things. And also what's important, kind of to remind students that every problem has a solution. And even if the problem seems very difficult, if you think about a little more and read a little more and study a little more, then you will find a solution. And that's a kind of a challenge and the beauty of statistics, that the more you study, the more new questions you discover and the more you learn. So, and that, I guess, is also important to kind of be upfront that you need to start somewhere. You start with basics, but then you can really advance your knowledge immensely. It just depends how much time you will spend on studying this topic and really becoming an expert. Now, let me share a few points about what our students do when they learn statistics, and these are responses from students that are marked here in blue. I asked some of the students at GSE who did statistics course to share with me what helps them to minimize the anxiety level when studying statistics, and here are some tips. So first of all, students say studying before the class and after the class help. And as two comments here, so one student said most helpful were the pre-recorded videos of the class content posted on Moodle, as well as video recordings from the class sessions on Zoom. The value for me was that I could return to any unclear concepts or steps as many times as I needed and practice them. And another student said that class notes provided by the course instructor helped me learn with less anxiety. And here I should explain that class notes, the way we would do it when we did lectures on Zoom, as the class runs, I also would type notes and comments to various statistical outputs, and then share these comments and class notes with students. So the second tip that students gave was that what really helped them learn and get anxiety under control was completing all small assignments. And the student says here, practice, practice, and practice. I would have not been able to learn statistical analysis using SPSS without practically doing the tasks, different types of analysis. Then also taking time to study independently was important. As the student said, individual lab works in the course helped me to decrease my statistics anxiety. And finally, also learning together with peers was recognized as a very valuable approach. And one student said that working in collaboration with peers was also helpful in clarifying some areas. And another one stated that preparation for the exams in quantitative research methods courses with group mates, where we developed our own learning strategy, which was very effective to learn and reduce anxiety. So basically, students, what they do, they study. They prefer before the class, they revise after the class. They do all small assignments. They take time to study independently, but they also study in group. And these were all steps that helped students at GSE to succeed in getting, not being as worried about the studying statistics and actually succeeding at mastering the content. Now, let me just finish with this question. Am I able to become a quantitative researcher, learn statistics? Maybe some of you in the audience may ask. So in research, a lot of answers start with the question, it depends. But generally, yes, there is potential that you can master enough quantitative research skills to become comfortable with doing this type of research. You can become competent reader of quantitative research, and you can excel and advance as quantitative researcher. You set your own limit. But of course, you have to start somewhere. So making the first step is really then giving yourself a chance to see if you will become a quantitative researcher. Persistence is very important. And as students also said, you have to study, practice, practice, practice. Their work is required. And of course, this content requires work as any other. Time is a crucial factor. As research says, you need to give yourself enough time to acquire concepts, to let them settle in, to give yourself chances to practice them in applying statistical data analysis techniques. It's a good idea to learn together with others, because sometimes when you feel stuck, someone else who does the same problem might have a way and help you. If there is nobody around, I ask my students, so what do you do in such situations? They say, I ask Google. So ask Google. If there is no immediate advice that would be available from some other support, your instructor or your peers who are more advanced in statistics. Plus, on internet, there are many communities of researchers who grapple exactly with these types of questions. In ResearchGate, which is a network of researchers, you will often find questions that researchers say, hey, I'm doing this kind of research and this is my problem. Has anybody any advice how I can proceed? And then people, who are more competent or with expertise in that given question would share. So, you can get to those types of forums also by asking Google, because then it links to ResearchGate discussions, for example. Again, persist. You just have to keep trying. And once you see that you are succeeding, it will be your best encouragement. And also what I've seen in my, teaching for many years, once students really learn and they find the ways that work for them, they succeed. So success is inevitable if you discover what works for you when you are learning. So learning to learn is really part of the journey here in mastering statistics. And the final point I would say is just stay curious and keep asking questions about the social world. And there are wonderful ways how you can examine these questions by using statistical data analysis. So these are the sources I used for the presentation here. And I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I can answer any questions now.
Thank you very much, Professor Rita Kasa. I will enable all the participants to unmute themselves and ask the question if they would like to ask it in person, or you can type it in the chat box. Please use this opportunity to ask the question. We have around 10 minutes for the QA.
Hello, Professor. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Mhm. I have started the journey in statistics, and I'm following your advice to learn with others. So I'm asking my colleagues from work placement, the mathematics teachers, basically, to help me to master. And we have started with Pearson correlation coefficient to study what it is. And my question is, are there instruments for in statistics which are considered to be like more widely recognized or more solid for like educational research?